All right. Had to make sure my computer hadn't blown up either. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about wisdom. Okay, what it means to have it and what it means to live it. Just exactly what is wisdom. There's one quote that I found that said, "Wisdom is seeing life from God's perspective." I kind of like that statement. But I want you to understand that wisdom isn't a complex and unattainable as some people make it out to be. In fact, wisdom isn't unattainable at all. It's free for the asking. We saw that at the very beginning of James, the first week that we started this. In James 1:5, it says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him." According to that passage, if you want wisdom, ask God and he'll give it to you. That's what James says in chapter 1. And now in chapter 3, which is where we're going to be tonight, he explains just exactly what wisdom is, and he teaches us how to put it to work in our lives. There are three aspects of wisdom that I want us to look at tonight. First of all, I want you to notice that wisdom isn't just something you know, it's something you do. James 3 verse 13 says, "Who is wise and has understanding among you? He should show his works by good conduct with wisdom's gentleness." He should show it, is what James says. Wisdom is more than just knowing what's best to do. Wisdom is doing what is best to do. Throughout history, you can find stories of huge mistakes that were made by some relatively smart and some might say wise people. In the 1860s, the Crimean War broke out and Russia discovered that they couldn't adequately guard Alaska's and its frontier. So to thwart the British, Russia sold Alaska to the United States for 2 cents per acre. Something that I'm sure they wish they hadn't done some 50 years later when gold was discovered. J.K. Rowling was denied 12 times in a row from publishers for her very first novel. The 8-year-old granddaughter of an editor at Bloomsbury Publishing picked up the draft and read it in just a few days. And then she went to her grandfather and said, "I want to know what happens to the people, to the children in this story." So the editor decided to purchase the book and whatever may come after it. Though he told J.K. Rowling when he purchased it, you better make sure you have a backup job. The first Harry Potter book was published in 1997. The following novels all sold faster than any other book in history. Kind of makes you wonder if the wise editors from those first 12 publishing companies had to find backup jobs. And I would imagine if we opened this up for discussion right now, a whole lot of us could tell stories about situations where we made some mistakes that we knew were wrong from the get-go. And maybe even advised other people, don't ever do this. Make sure you don't ever do this. And yet, we ourselves made those mistakes. We have the intellectual capacity to know which actions should be avoided at all costs. And yet, so many times, we don't do it. That's because wisdom isn't just about what you know, it's about what you do. James says, if you're wise, show it by your good life and your good deeds. He's saying, and this is the big idea that I want you to focus on tonight, wisdom is better seen than heard. It's not just knowledge, it's knowledge in action. And the next thing that I want you to notice is that wisdom is quiet and unassuming. James says we show wisdom by good conduct with wisdom gentleness. That's what he said in 13. In other words, he's saying a wise person doesn't have to advertise his brilliance. He only has to model it. Now look at the next verses. Look at verses 14 through 16 here in James chapter 3. It says, but if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, don't brag and deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where envy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every kind of evil. Envy and selfish ambition are the opposite of humility and wisdom. Think about it for a minute. Envy is the enemy of wisdom. When you become envious, you lose perspective. Envy doesn't inspire you to something good for mankind. It goads you into doing something to make yourself look better than or try to have more than somebody else. It's been said that envy designs the darts that failures throw at the successful. So let me ask this. Have you ever been envious? Ever? I thought I might get a few nods, but I wasn't seeing anything. I thought, man, y'all need to get up here and preach this. I want you to know that even church staff and pastors struggle with this all the time. One of my favorite cartoons from a preaching journal is of a pastor's convention. There's this big pastor's convention that you see. And there's a guy speaking to this huge gathering of preachers. And there's this giant thought bubble over the whole audience that shows about half of those in attendance are thinking the same thing. I could do better than this guy. Envy causes us to say, why him? Why not me? I'm as good as he is. It's just not fair. Envy shifts our focus from serving God to serving ourselves. And the desire to serve ourselves is where self-destructive behavior begins. It's the same with selfish ambition. And please notice that James doesn't condemn ambition, he condemns selfish ambition. There's a difference. Selfish ambition doesn't inspire you to do something great for the glory of God. It drives you to try to do something glitzy for the glory of you. Selfish ambition thrives on attention, power, recognition, and reward. It's not about serving others. It's about serving yourself. When you start serving yourself, you divorce yourself from wisdom. James says that wisdom is expressed in humility. Selfish ambition is loud and boastful. Wisdom is quiet and humble. If you're wise, you don't have to toot your own horn. Your wisdom will make itself obvious. That's because wisdom is better seen than heard. Warren Buffett might possibly be one of the best investors of all time. My personal opinion, even though I don't necessarily agree with his politics, but my personal opinion here is that he's a very smart man. I read quite a few articles about Warren Buffett. And it appears from reading these articles that Warren Buffett is also a very humble man. Now, I don't know him personally, so I don't know. This is what the articles imply. According to Forbes magazine, today, because you can go onto Forbes magazine and it tells you to the day, they have this thing that charts every day wealthy people's worth. Today, Warren Buffett is worth $107.2 billion with a B dollars. That was $117 million down from what it was yesterday. Must be rough. Besides the fact that he could afford something a whole lot bigger, Warren Buffett still lives in the 6-bedroom house that he purchased in 1956. He's known for condemning extravagant expenses and purchases by CEOs. And he still often uses public transportation. Can you imagine that? Somebody worth billions still rides the bus and still just gets on a normal airplane. Up until 4 years ago, he still used a flip phone. And at that point, he had only ever sent one email. Might be nice to go back to that at some point, wouldn't it? Now, like I said, I obviously don't know Warren Buffett personally, okay? But I kind of feel like there's probably a little bit of an air of truth in the things that I read. There are a lot of personalities, from actors to sports stars, that go about doing what they do without bragging about their accomplishments. And you can find a whole lot of them that do brag about their accomplishments. But there are some who don't. And in my view, they stand out even more in their professions because of their humble personalities. Found a couple of quotes that I really liked. It is far more impressive when others discover your good qualities without your help. Don't brag. It's not the whistle that moves the train. And the really tough thing about humility is you can't brag about it. Wisdom is made more pronounced when it's modest, but yet seen. And that brings us to the third thing that I want us to see tonight, and that is wisdom is best expressed in how you treat others. Specifically, wisdom is expressed in the ability to get along with others. Listen to how James describes it in verse 17. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without favoritism and hypocrisy. James uses 8 words here and phrases to describe what wisdom is. And when you read this list, you notice that it defines a different type of wisdom than what we might imagine. We often think wisdom is sort of like knowing it all. But he indicates that wisdom is more like admitting that you don't know it all. He says that wisdom is first of all pure. This is in contrast to the earthly wisdom that he had previously described. The kind of wisdom that was motivated by selfish ambition and led to disorder and all the evil practices. True wisdom instead has a pure motivation. Do you want wisdom? Start by checking your motives. Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." The more focused you are on serving God and not yourself, the closer you are to walking in wisdom. He says that wisdom is peace-loving. The Greek word for peace here describes a right relationship between individuals and a right relationship between an individual and God. Wisdom finds a way to build bridges from one person to the next. Peace-loving. He says that wisdom is gentle. Other translations say considerate. One commentary I looked at said this Greek word describes the person who knows when it's actually wrong to apply the strict letter of the law. A perfect example of this is the woman who was caught in adultery. Because according to the law, she should have been put to death. Jesus saw that this was a time when the law shouldn't have been applied. Her accusers, the Pharisees, wanted to see her die. Jesus had the wisdom to recognize that it would be better to serve this woman and better serve the purposes of God for her to be given another chance. Anyone can apply the strict letter of the law. It only takes knowledge of the law. Wisdom understands when to make allowances. James says also that wisdom is compliant. Other translations say reasonable or submissive. This Greek word means able to be convinced. In other words, is the kind of person who doesn't think that he's right all the time. He's willing to listen to both sides of the story. There are hundreds of articles online that talk about humble leadership and how a great leader contributes what they know, but then listens to the input of others before a decision is made. And he says that wisdom is full of mercy and good fruit. James connects these two terms because they need to be connected. In the Greek, mercy means literally pity for the one who is suffering. Good fruit means following up on mercy with practical help. He's saying that the person who has wisdom recognizes those who are in need and then helps them. Not just recognizing it, not just seeing it, but doing something about it. That shows true wisdom. And he says that wisdom is without favoritism. This phrase refers to treating everyone equally, being impartial. You see this played out in politics all the time. People often support or reject an idea based on who's saying it or what party it came from, rather than the idea itself. Okay, I'm going to try not to get real political here, but when Joe Biden took office, the first thing he did was every law, everything that Trump had put in place, he immediately got rid of. Just because it was Trump. Didn't make any difference whether they were a good thing or not. If Trump had his hand on something, the Democrats wanted to get rid of it. That doesn't necessarily show a lot of wisdom, because there was a whole lot of favoritism there. Wisdom can discern the difference. It treats every situation, every idea, and every individual impartially. And James says that wisdom is without hypocrisy. You need to be totally sincere. Garth Brooks used to sing a song that contained the line, "I ain't no hypocrite, what you see is what you get." But that's what wisdom really is. It's not pretentious. It's not about image. It's about content. A wise person doesn't pretend to be something that he isn't. He's honest with others about who he is. These 8 characteristics of wisdom: purity, peacefulness, gentleness, compliant or submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, without favoritism and hypocrisy, all point in one direction: how you treat other people. That's how wisdom is expressed. We often think of wisdom as something that primarily benefits us individually. If I have wisdom, I'll make good financial decisions and I'll have money. I'll make good business decisions and I'll be successful. I'll make good parenting decisions and I'll be proud of my children, and so on. It's only part of it. If you have wisdom, chances are you'll make good financial decisions. You won't be broke all the time, which will give you the ability to be a generous blessing to others. If you have wisdom, chances are you'll make good parenting decisions as well. You'll have children that you can be proud of. But parenting isn't about you. If you have wisdom, you'll make parenting decisions that benefit your children most of all. And that will result in them becoming people of character, giving them the opportunity to build their lives up in a great way. Your wisdom benefits you only incidentally. Primarily, it benefits other people. Wisdom expresses itself in how you treat others, and more specifically, how you serve others. It's because wisdom is better seen than heard. Wisdom is not just something you know, it's something you show. James concludes this whole section in verse 18 by saying, "And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who cultivate peace." You want wisdom? You can have it. All you have to do is ask, and God will give it to you. And here's what it'll look like. You'll build bridges between you and others. between one person and the next, between others and God. That's because wisdom isn't a noun, it's a verb. It's not something you have, it's something you do. It's not something you hear, it's something you see. Wisdom is not something you know, it's something you show. Take out your prayer sheets, if you would.